Good afternoon and welcome to ECEP's deep dive on centering equity and access, fostering participant success in ECE Registered Apprenticeships. I am Sandra Moore. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at ECEPS and so excited to be here with you all today as we go into this deep dive that will explore what it means to challenge historic inequities and overcome systemic barriers in order to effectively engage the ECE workforce. Before we go into our panel discussion and I introduce you to our RAPS directors, I wanted to share our mission with you. Thank you. So our mission is to advance the rigorous professional development and economic well-being of those who teach, nurture, and support young children and families. When you break down our mission statement, you'll see and understand that we do our work through a social justice lens. Our mission statement doesn't actually have the word equity in it, but I'm going to take a minute to just read between the lines with you. When you see that word economic well-being, that means that people have their most basic survival needs met and have family sustaining and thriving income. We do that by putting equity at the forefront of all we do while helping people to attain certificates and degrees while climbing the ECE career ladder. And next slide, please. Thank you. When we look at this slide, it's from the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment. This slide acts as somewhat of a North Star for what we do in our work in terms of breaking down barriers. And just indulge me for a minute as I read to you. Centering equity and access. When we acknowledge that biases and barriers reside with systems, not individuals, and intentionally work together to create conditions for success, college education and professional training become attainable for current and future early educators. And I want to highlight the term intentional here because our work is done on purpose with great purpose. We can no longer afford to sit back on the sidelines as the world turns. As the world turns is funny because it used to be a soap opera. But as the world turns, we must be really actively engaged and be the change that we wish to see in the world. That's our responsibility, and ECEPS takes that very seriously. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our RAPS directors, and that's Registered Apprenticeship Program directors. And in alphabetical order, they will introduce themselves and share with you what equity means to them. We'll go with Daryl first, then Chanel, Noemi, then Keisha.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, wherever you are. I guess it's afternoon for everyone now. We're here on the West Coast. I'm Daryl Bright. I am a RAPS director here at ECEPS. And equity for me really means providing access to program possibilities in a process that's clear and understandable and complete so that individuals kind of know what they're getting themselves into. And also really taking into consideration how the information is shared, what language is it in. Is it online versus in person? Is it paper versus digital? And really taking the community into consideration from the idea of it to the implementation. And also within a framework, ensuring that the programming is reflective of the population you're serving. Hearing from diverse and underrepresented voices in the field will not only allow apprentices to see themselves, but it exposes them to the plethora of possibilities within the field for them to aspire to. And that would be it for me.
Great, thank you. Next.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chanel Brumfield. I am one of the RAPS directors with ECEPS. Daryl, that is a tough act to follow, so thank you for level setting. Equity to me means being just, impartial, and fair. And I think the key word for me is acknowledgement, acknowledging that we all come with lived experiences and really taking into consideration, acknowledging those experiences and addressing some of the imbalances. So it means meeting the people and the communities that we serve where we are or where they are, and addressing some of those imbalances in a non-biased way.
Great, thank you.
Good
Noemi?
afternoon, everybody. Noemi Catalan, a Registered Apprenticeship Programs Director with ECEPS as well. And it was very hard for me to even try to define what equity means to me, because I feel like it encompasses so much. But for me, it means opportunities and resources, because both are needed to create great outcomes for all members in the community. And personally, as a foreign-born and first-generation college student myself, I have experienced firsthand how impactful giving someone access to education is. Education is a powerful tool for economic mobility, and having the opportunity to access education is not enough. People also need the resources, because earning a degree can be expensive, and considering the cost of living these days, of course, people will prioritize having a roof over their heads and food to eat over pursuing higher education. So that's also why I personally believe that degree apprenticeships for the ECE workforce are a no-brainer, as one of the best workforce strategies for this workforce. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it to Keisha.
And good afternoon, I'm Keisha Hayes. I am also a RAPS director here at ECEPS. And center equity and access means dismantling system barriers that can open doors for people who normally wouldn't have the opportunity. In my experience with equity not being at the center, it made it really difficult to navigate through systems, which could really prevent me from pursuing my goal. Being, as Noemi said, being a first-time generation student, I didn't know how to access what I needed because I didn't know what I needed. And especially when it came to finances, due to the lack thereof, I had to work multiple jobs as well as try to carry a full caseload. So I left school in a lot of debt due to having to take out loans and try to, take out loans to try to continue my education. So having equity and access at the forefront ensures, like, no matter where you start or where you come from, you can finish strong with the proper tools and the resources at hand.
Great. Thank you for bringing us home, Keisha. That was wonderful. Okay, so we are going to get started here. We're going to throw out the first question for Daryl. Daryl, what are some of the systemic barriers you have encountered, and what solutions have you observed?
Well, Sandra, running joke. It was just mentioned, and I would say one of the most common barriers are, that financial burden, how am I going to pay for classes, books and supplies, nowadays more technology, not only access to technology, but navigating it. The digital divide has really been under spotlight since the pandemic, and we really want to make sure that individuals understand that. The lack of family and community support and understanding the commitment and the challenges of a student, especially these first generation college students or first generation immigrants might not necessarily understand, the commitment that it takes to be a successful college student. And then inflexible workplace policies at times have really been a barrier to individuals pursuing college and just higher aspirations in general. But I think in those problems lies the solution, and that is apprenticeships. And I think the key elements of apprenticeships really address a multitude of these challenges in multiple ways. For the financial burden and access to courses for full-time employed students, it's a different conversation when you go to colleges with 20 to 25 individuals that need a class at a certain time. So really leveraging those opportunities to make it work for both parties. In addition, cohorted numbers, like numbers speak volumes, and they provide access and intentional, as Sandra said, intentional work within the group. Understanding that they'll go through these challenges together and they'll help each other throughout the process. And then connecting with community resources. One agency is not going to be able to solve all of the challenges that a student may face. So really being connected to the community in ways that impact your students. There are certain instances where they were connected to social services to help participants with transportation or housing issues, connecting with maybe community health organizations with pre-employment health screens. Because a lot of these things are barriers that we wouldn't necessarily consider, but are barriers for individuals that are coming into our agency. And then in the technology, really using the systems and existing facilities that a lot of our programs already have. I've seen a program that had used their sites to allow students to come in and connect to the internet in the evenings if they may not have that at home. It also provides intentional training for your mentors and your success coordinators to engage with those apprentices in a different way, to guide them through that, navigating that technology. And then really addressing the flexible workspaces. Employers are integral in the development of this process. So they'll be at the beginning and understanding what their employees will be going through while they're pursuing their education and working in their centers. And hopefully they see the benefits immediately in the way that apprenticeship connects the college coursework with what's actually going on in the field.
Great.
And I just wanted to take a moment to kind of piggyback and zoom up a little bit when we talk about apprenticeship, because, you know, apprenticeship has been around, it's been well established for a very long time, but we also know that, especially apprenticeship in new and innovative sectors, that apprenticeship should also have the same parity as receiving a four-year degree or going to a four-year institution. And there's this misconception that I think we battle a little bit when we get the word out to, of course, like high school students and folks that are interested in apprenticeship, is that it can lead to livable and sustainable family wages. So, you know, apprenticeship as a pathway to higher education is a constant barrier that we at ECEPS really help to illuminate for audiences that may be interested in apprenticeship, but not really quite clear of what it means to be an apprentice, what you have access to, the supports, and how it can be a pathway to a degree.
Great, thank you. That was a good example of how we talk about the difference between systems and individuals, which was as part of our quote. So very important. We heard a lot of systems in that question. Okay, so Noemi, what role can partnerships play in centering equity and the needs of participants?
Yes, so part of what you said just now, I think goes well with this question, because we have the first step in addressing equity gaps is recognizing that they exist. And sometimes we have operated within a specific system for so long that we are no longer aware of the processes or policies, etc., that might be in place that are reinforcing these equity gaps. And so I think that when we come, you know, as a partnership, when we have these partnership meetings, we invite the leaders and administrators to identify all of these equity gaps, and then to also take a step back and to realize that all of these are not always all the gaps that the apprentices experience. And so my best advice for partnerships to center equity and the needs of participants is to gather the feedback from the apprentices directly as often as possible. No one better than themselves to let you know if something is working or not and what their needs are. And I say that this feedback needs to be gathered often because what might have worked for one group might not work for the next one. And in the same way, it's important to document your program design and to track the decisions made within a specific areas so that you have a point of reference when deciding what to change and how to change it. For example, when ECEPS is supporting the design of or registered apprenticeship programs, we ask for partners to flesh out the details of the related supplemental instruction. And this section includes course sequence, learning modalities, meaning whether the course will take place in person or online, whether it'll be synchronous or asynchronous, etc. We plan the RSI the related supplemental instruction, forgive me for speaking in acronyms, for the duration of the program. And any program lasts anywhere from between 6 to 2 years. And so we plan for far ahead, but we don't always set that plan in stone. We revisit that plan every semester, and we reflect on how that design is aligning with the needs of the apprentices. So it could be that we had planned to offer a course online for the duration of the program. And then after the first semester, we realized that people actually really benefit from being in person, that they are struggling with online learning. And so we make the switch accordingly. And it could be that by the following semester, because they have already been in the program for at least, a year, they're a little bit more seasoned. And so we go back to online, or we do hybrid. So that's why it's important to have a track record of how you're operating and to have a plan, but a plan that's adaptable and flexible. And lastly, I encourage our partners to also be advocates for their apprentices. Very often, we have the opportunity to be in spaces that they're not, and so we must use these opportunities to raise their needs as well.
I really like what you had to say about the needs of the participants. And what that makes me think of is so often when we're in the planning phase of things, we are thinking with our minds and our work and our workforce space, as opposed to what the participants actually need. So Daryl was talking a lot about technology. A lot of times we're like, okay, we need to get everybody laptops. Well, maybe the actual participant need, when we're thinking about equity, I don't need a laptop, but I do need a hotspot. So trying to figure out what the actual needs are really important if we're really thinking about what equity is. Okay, Chanel, you are up. What are the key factors in identifying and selecting potential apprentices for your program using an equity lens?
So equity begins before the apprentice even starts the program. A quality apprenticeship program should reflect the communities in which it operates. So with this in mind, it's important to approach outreach, recruitment, and selection with intentionality and with an equity lens. So for example, we work with our partners to significantly reform and identify their outreach and recruitment strategies. So that way employers aren't reproducing the status quo, but really tapping into talent not otherwise explored. So some considerations or examples in the outreach, recruitment, and selection process is understanding your target population and their communities and networks. Developing outreach, recruitment, and selection processes that are streamlined and clearly communicated to the candidates that you're hoping to have join your program. Also, really being curious about your eligibility requirements. So are there eligibility requirements that are creating more barriers for your target population or for your population, and being strategic in how you're going to address some of those barriers? Also at ECEPS, we tend to say clear is kind. So thinking through, is the information that you're providing regarding the apprenticeship program and your marketing material clear to your target population? And also the language. We had a partnership that did a phenomenal job in working with community partners to develop flyers in different languages to spread a wider net in reaching more people to join the program. Also with recruitment, are you hosting information sessions at times that are accessible to people who may have children and other commitments with their families? So making that accessible to people that may want to join the program. And the standardization of the selection process. So thinking through, what are your interview protocols? How are you equitably evaluating candidates that seek to join the program? And most importantly, who are you having at the table to conduct those interviews and ask those questions? Because you have candidates that may want to work with the organization that's reflective of the communities that they live in and the people that they are in community with often, and being transparent about the selection process. So these are the steps partners can take before the apprentice starts the program, and even in the design phase of thinking about that part of the process of outreach, selection, and recruitment before an apprentice joins the program, I think is really important.
Janelle, can you give us an example of an eligibility requirement that might be considered a barrier that you've had experience with?
So there was concerns regarding, of course, we had vaccinations, COVID, and we had a potential candidate that did not feel comfortable getting the vaccination. So there was a little bit of a barrier there in which our employer partners individually talked to the candidate just to understand what some of those concerns were, the sharing of like information. So I think that was one example where the employer stepped outside of the box and really individualized that conversation and process for that particular candidate and made sure that they were comfortable in understanding why like that vaccination was needed to join the program and things of that nature. So it wasn't a one size fits all approach in their communication with that candidate.
Great, great. Noemi, I saw your hand.
Yes, I wanted to add a little something that I just thought about, and that was I had experience with a program that started, they started recruiting parents in their Head Start centers to join an apprenticeship program. And then they realized that some of them actually needed a lot of support with English before they could even join the program. So rather than selecting them out and saying, sorry, you can't make it because you don't have at least the minimum skills to be able to take these classes in English, what they did is that they partnered with the adult school in the community, and they sent the apprentices, the pre-apprentices, really. It was a pre-apprenticeship to the pre-apprenticeship because that was even before they entered a pre-apprenticeship. So they started offering them classes in English, so for ESL courses. So I think that that's also something that we have to consider when we're recruiting apprentices, because what we're trying to do is to give as many people an opportunity to join these programs and to equip them with the necessary skills and tools and knowledge and training so that they can be successful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, next we have Keisha. ECEPS, as we have started to talk about, puts equity at the center of everything we do. We find it to be very important. How do you, in your experience, begin to shift the thinking in organizations and systems that don't understand how to address the needs of the target population?
Shifting thinking in organizations and systems that don't understand the target population requires a multifaceted approach. It is important to provide as much information and awareness about the target populations. Like in my experience, the lack of this knowledge can lead to unrealistic expectations, as well as assumptions that can hinder the progress of the program. So an example I can give about that is it caused a lot of confusion, like on-the-job training, setting your apprentices into a workspace, and they're with the mentor, and it's like, what do I do with this mentor? What's going on? What is my expectation? How am I supposed to operate as an apprentice in this space, as well as how does the mentor direct this space? So just being clear and making sure that you are given as much information as possible. Having trainings and workshops and meetings to address this. Make sure you have a representative from the target population come in and give testimonials about their experience from their perspective to ensure their voices are heard, and make sure their perspective is even considered. I would say definitely collect and share some data that highlights these challenges and barriers faced by the target population. This can be very persuasive in driving change in thinking. And lastly, I would say foster empathy and encourage open-mindedness within the organization by pointing out that equity relates to the overall good of the organization as a whole.
Great, thank you. And Noemi, same question. What are your thoughts around helping organizations to understand their target population?
Yeah, so rather than shifting, I think I would like to, I like to think that we encourage our partners or organizations or systems to expand the way that we think about equity. For instance, we usually, have support services to participants, and we try to make them accessible. But what might be accessible for one person might not be accessible for the other. So it requires that we do not make assumptions about everyone's needs and situations, because even when the needs are the same, often people have different capacities or abilities to address them in the same way. And Keisha said it very well when she said that organizations need to create an empathetic atmosphere and set realistic expectations. And that is because most apprentices walk into their work sites with little to no experience. And it's important for organizations and incumbent staff to understand that they will need a lot of guidance and support from center directors, mentors, and more seasoned teachers. And apprentices are not only becoming ECE workers or professionals, they're also maybe starting their first semester as a college student. They're really navigating a lot. So when you consider all of the pressure that they're under and everything that they go through, it's very important that we address the needs of the target population that we're serving, not only as a group, but that organizations also implement an individualized approach.
Great, thank you. And I just want to piggyback on to what Keisha and Noemi said in regards to the different systems and helping them to shift. That's really what the work of the program team is when working with partnerships, to help them see the equity in the plan that they may not be able to see at the forefront. So if something like, if you're planning to your coursework plan, and the first course you're going to teach is the child growth and development class, which is one of the harder courses, and you say, you know, we have an ELL group that we're working with, English as second language learners, and we want to have that class be first, and we want to have it be 8 weeks. We're going to give you a little pushback on that, because is that really an equitable way to have to put forth a successful plan for their apprentices? Because that is a harder course. English is their second language. 8 weeks for someone who speaks English, it's hard to get through that course in 8 weeks. So just thinking through what fairness looks like and what justice looks like, and what we have a no-fail policy. And if we have a no-fail policy, we have to put equity markers in place so that failure does not occur. Noemi, I saw your hand.
Yes, you made me think about another example.
Okay.
When we were doing the planning phase, we had a person say, I think we're overthinking like how much support these people really need. We're talking about grown-ups, people who are at least, 20 years old, people who for sure know how to train on a computer, for sure know how to get to, X place to get to class. And sometimes when these kind of conversations arise, you have to take a deep breath and take it in, and then really be thoughtful about how to respond. So we talked about the kind of needs that these people might have, and we talked about how important it was to be open-minded, to be flexible, to try it out before we say no. And at the end of the semester, we came to the realization that they needed more support than we had even planned for. And this person was like, oh my goodness, I could not have anticipated how much hand holding these people needed. And so I think that part of asking organizations to, reconsider their mindset is also asking them for an opportunity to reconsider what they think they know, and to just be open-minded and to be willing to try it, to be willing to be innovative, because it might actually be great. So now we're planning for ways to reinforce those supports so that the apprentices can continue to be successful in the program.
Excellent. Noemi, you're still talking, so I'm going to keep you talking.
Okay.
ECEP's secret sauce incorporates research-based participant supports in its apprenticeship programs. In your experience, what are some of the critical components for participant success, but that are challenging, but they are also challenging to implement?
Yes. So the ECEP secret sauce, or special sauce, we have many participant supports, but I think that it's really hard to choose. But I would say that some of the critical ones are success coordination, mentoring, and cohort learning. So success coordinator, it's the person who communicates with the apprentice and really becomes the apprentice's cheerleader. They're the first point of contact, and they're a liaison between or partners. And it's really important for apprentices to start building relationships with program staff from day one, because if they don't feel comfortable about telling you what they need, how are you going to learn how to address those needs if you don't even know where to begin? And success coordinators also facilitate the navigation of the higher education system. Sometimes they provide professional guidance as well on their work sites. I was a success coordinator, so I could tell you that I didn't feel myself very important, but years later, I have people reaching out and telling me, oh my goodness, the support that you gave me really set me on a path to success. And now I feel very competent in doing X, Y, and Z. And I've come to the realization that what people really need is somebody who's willing to hold their hands for as long as they need, so that they gain the skills and the competence that they need to be successful on their own. And so that's really what our success coordinators do. And then mentoring, of course, everybody here, I think all of us learned at least from one person who had more experience and more knowledge than us, and we learned how to be a professional. And the same is true for these apprentices. They learn from more seasoned teachers, and that relationship can really motivate them to stay in the class and to really fall in love with the field. And lastly, cohort learning, just in the same way that it is support with their academics and their professional development, they also need emotional support. They also need to feel part of a community. They also need to feel a sense of belonging. And I feel like cohort learning can really provide them with all of that. Having a peer network that they can lean into for personal support as well, emotional support, is really critical. And all of these are hard to implement because all of them require resources. And a lot of the work that we do is funded through grants. And if you are hoping to have a person for at least 5 years or 6 years, you're going to have to be seeking funding constantly so that you can keep your success coordinator on staff. And sometimes even when you have funds, you don't always have all the funds to fund a full-time position. Maybe you only have for a part-time position, and maybe you have a lot of apprentices. And so that's also challenging as well. And then with the mentoring, a lot of teachers are really great with teaching children, but do need a little bit of support with transferring the knowledge that they have to adults. And so it requires extra work, because now you're trying to build the capacity of your mentors to be able to support the apprentices as well. And that requires additional time on their end and additional resources from the organization. And the cohort learning as well, sometimes apprentices take classes at their own pace, so they're not always taking classes together in a cohort. So it requires organizations to think outside the box and to expand their definition of cohort, and to find different ways to create community within the group outside of the classroom. And those activities, etc., requires somebody leading them, which is often the success coordinator, but at least somebody, and that's somebody's time that you have to pay for. So yeah, those are some of the examples that I think I wanted to highlight from today, even though every single component in our secret sauce is important. I think these three are key for their apprentices' success, and to really center equity and access in the programs that we implement.
Great. And I think Daryl also wanted to tag on to this question, as he has some experience with the secret sauce. So what would you say would be the critical component, Daryl?
I would also add, just really adding on to that on-the-job training mentor piece. We have a lot of aspirations when we're building these programs to bring in, we're going to bring in 25 this year and 25 next year and 25, and we're building the workforce, but we really need to ensure that we have the mechanisms within our agencies to absorb these individuals in a supportive way. You just can't throw individuals to the fire and expect them to be successful and thrive in these spaces. So really ensuring that the mechanisms are in place to support these apprentices and what they need when they come onto your centers. And as well as Noemi said, that the mentors understand what they're getting themselves into. Because because like she said, a lot of our teachers may be great at teaching children, but not necessarily transmitting or translating this information to other adults. And that's where those cultural dynamics and those types of things kind of come into play when you're doing those pairings with your mentors and apprentices. And you don't necessarily want to overwhelm one of your best teachers with a lot of stuff. So really having that mindset and taking that in consideration with the on-the-job training and the mentor piece, and developing your mentors throughout this process as well, because they're going to need it to ensure that the culture of your agency is really being infused from the beginning.
Okay, and it looks like there's a question about the high school parent program. I am not tracking, I cannot see it. Let's hold on to that question until we wrap up and we will come back to that. Who is that?
Sandra, before we move on to the next question, could I actually piggyback on both Daryl and Noemi's response to the participant supports? Because I know we go out and we talk about the secret sauce, which isn't so much of a secret. Like, we're willing to share, all of our knowledge and experience being in this space and implementing some of these supports. But what I wanted to add was, we understand that these supports, of course, cost money. And one thing that we have learned through the process of working with our partners is about really getting the right partner at the table that's willing to step outside the box and challenge the status quo in offering some of that flexible funding to be able to support some of these innovative practices that support the apprentices. So I know Noemi touched on the funding implications, so I wanted to add on to that because we have come across many partners who are like, you guys are doing some innovative things. Like, how can we support with transportation and some of these other supports to make sure that we're supporting the members of the community and the people in the program?
Great, thank you. And that just brings me to mind that we always hear and talk about braiding of funding. Sometimes when we're doing these partnerships, we need to braid resources, because it's one partner may be able to do tutoring, one partner may be able to do this. Put your resources together so everybody can benefit. And Noemi.
Since you want to keep me talking, I'll keep talking. And I also wanted to say, if you have ever attended one of our other webinars and you've seen what our research supports and our secret sauce looks like, I also want you to feel like you don't have to start from day one with all of this. This is something that we strive for and something that we work to achieve every single day. But I think that not having all of these pieces in place shouldn't stop, it shouldn't stop somebody from getting the work started, because we want all of you to get the work, started, because it's needed and it's important.
Great, thank you. Keisha, do you have anything to add? Everybody else had something to add. I just want to make sure.
Kind of took everything that I was going to say, especially around the mentoring, relationships, and things like that. So no, I won't even mess it up and say anything.
Okay, we are getting close to wrapping up. We have one last question that we're going to end with, and that is, what advice would you give to other ECE reps looking to design an equitable and participant-centered program? And let's start with Chanel.
Thanks, Sandra. I'm gonna try to bring it on home. So having the right partners at the table that have a shared commitment, and I'm going to repeat that again, a shared commitment to equity and a no-fail policy when it comes to apprentices' success. Also, in the program design, we understand that apprenticeship is employer-driven. However, we encourage our partners to really design with the target population that they're hoping to serve in the community in mind. So identifying potential systemic barriers and really having our partners think through what facets are within their wheelhouse or control to be able to address and remove some of those barriers. As far as recruitment and access, creating a recruitment and a selection process that is equitable. I talked a little bit about that earlier. And designing a program that's creating career pathways to livable wage in which the apprentice is thriving and not just surviving. So this includes designing a program that is degree applicable and can allow the apprentice to continue with their education if that's their desire to do so. Also incorporating worker voice. So that means getting feedback and developing a feedback loop to help continuously improve the apprentice's experience. This can be achieved through a satisfaction survey and creating spaces for psychological safety. And lastly, challenging the status quo, encouraging our partners to be curious about existing biases, what's working and what's not working, and don't be afraid to pivot when necessary, because we understand that pivoting is going to be necessary with every cohort. There is a new learning, a new challenge, but a new opportunity to not be afraid of being better and challenging the status quo.
Great. And let's give everybody one final word. Chanel was our mic drop with that, but we're going to have one final word as we close out. Let's go with Keisha. We haven't heard your voice in a few minutes.
Well, I would just say, just overall, just as my colleagues have said, it's just thinking outside of the box, challenging that status quo and put equity right at the center, because it would create so much access and so many opportunities for for people to get what they need. Because it's really hard out here. It's really difficult to navigate, and sometimes just having not having your basic needs not met can definitely get in the way of things. So definitely I would say challenge that status quo and go out there and be a champion for your apprentices.
Great, thank you. Daryl, last note.
Lastly, I would say, as we're building these partnerships and collaboration, really be honest about your organization and their capacity. A lot of times we want to pump up our agency. Hey, we could do this, we could do this, we could do it all. But if it takes 6 months to get something approved in your agency, you might not necessarily need to be the fiscal lead in a situation. So really being honest about where you stand and your capacities as an agency is really critical in building sustainable and effective apprenticeships. And that's it.
Right, and Noemi?
How do I add anything? I think that I used to think that one of the hardest parts of launching ECE programs was actually getting them to launch. And then I had the honor of supporting the launch of a couple, and then I realized that it's much harder to implement them and sustain them, because it is when you're operating that you're encountering all of these challenges, and that you actually have apprentices in your program that might experience the effects of the decisions that you make. And so I don't say this to discourage anybody from doing this type of work, but I do say it to emphasize the importance of effective collaboration among your partners, and to partner with a purpose, so that if all of the partners at the table are looking at these issues through the same equity lens, it's going to be a little bit easier to navigate these challenges, because everybody's going to be as committed to address these inequities in the same way. And to design a program that not only considers the population and its needs on a professional and academic level, but that also considers their mental, physical, and emotional needs. And like I said before, the work is not easy, but it's meaningful, impactful, and very worth it.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. So we have a few more minutes, so we wanted to open up and take a couple of questions. And Lindy, the question about where was the Head Start parent program, I'd like to learn more about that. I'm not sure what that question is.
I think Noemi, you referenced it as an example.
Yeah, I talked about a program. It's one of our employers, actually. They have one of the largest in our network apprenticeship programs, and they were recruiting parents from their Head Start centers to be part of these apprenticeship programs. And they realized that they didn't have the English skills that they needed to start taking college courses. So rather than telling them, sorry, you can't participate because your English is not good enough, they actually reached out to the adult school in the community, and they partnered with that adult school to provide ESL courses to these parents to prepare them for these college courses.
Right.
And once those, courses were completed, they transitioned into the apprenticeship program. At least some of them did.
Right. No, I remember hearing you say all that. I was just curious, do you have any data about that program? How successful were they in recruiting and retaining those parents in the program?
Daryl, do you want to add a little bit more?
Yes, we do. We had 19 parents that came into that portion of our program when I was at a previous job. And all 19 actually ended up enrolling into the apprenticeship once they completed their ESL coursework. I'm not necessarily familiar with where they are in the process now as I've transitioned away from that role, but while I was there, all 19 ended up passing and then enrolling into the apprenticeship program.
Great, thank you. Do we have, and I see that Randy, thank you, Randy. Randy put a slide for our secret, not so secret, special, wonderful sauce in the chat. So if you guys have not seen that, you will see all of the wraparound services and supports that we were discussing. Can you email all this information in this webinar? The webinar is being recorded, so you will get a recording emailed out if you registered. And also, I wanted to share some information about our upcoming conference and boot camp. Let's see. Thank you, Camilla. Okay. Here's the slide about our conference that's coming up. It's going to be May 6th through 9th. And we are for those of you who are in California, we're going to be in Sacramento this year. For those of you who are not in California, come on down to Sacramento. It's our capital. So we'd love to have you. We are putting it together as we speak, May 6th through the 9th in Sacramento. And we also have a boot camp. Here's our QR code. Who's doing that circle? Is that Noemi or Randy or Camilla? It's one of the three.
That was me. That's just the QR code.
I knew it was one of the three of you. Thank you so much. There's our QR code. So if you are interested, please register. We'd love to see you. We are also having a boot camp if you're interested in learning more and getting a little bit more of a deep dive before the conference. We have a boot camp set up that's going to be in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that is going to be March 6th. Is it March 6th through 9th? I think so.
7th through
March 7th
8th.
and 8th.
March 7th and 8th. That's between the 6th and the 9th.
And there's
Okay.
a link to the flyer in the chat box.
Great. Thank you very much. So do we have any more questions?
Or comments? Or wonderings or curiosities? What do you call it, Chanel?
Curiosities, wonders, questions.
Ahas.
Ahas, yeah.
If not, I would make one concluding comment as Executive Director of ECEPS. And I want to thank my team very much for this presentation, which was detailed and thoughtful and insightful. And I'm just really proud of the work that you all do. Oh, and now I'm spotlighted. Okay, anyhow. But what I wanted to mention is that many of you on this call have heard me give these kind of presentations. And there is a substantive difference when the team presents, because they have an understanding and a personal experience and a personal commitment that in all of my best intentions as a middle-class, middle-aged white woman, I cannot fully share. I can respect it and I can make significant and serious efforts to make sure I'm on my game, it's still different. And so I think for me, listening to just the way you explain things and the basis on which you explain things, it's significantly different than where too often in policy discussions or ECE professional development discussions, the people around the table are a group of middle-aged white people with a lot of letters after their names. And that's not to denigrate those people. At the same time, it is different. And I just want to underscore that in the spirit of this topic in particular, that being about equity and access and fairness and justice, that authentic representation is even more important. So again, I just want to thank you all for the roles you play and the integrity with which you do your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Randy. Thank you.
Please stop highlighting me now.
Okay, I think if there are no more questions, we will give you 5 minutes of your life, and thank you very much for coming. And we hope that something was said and something was heard that will be a change agent in your experience. So have a wonderful day.